How about if I just start at the beginning? you could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real World's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins, brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Welcome, everyone, to Chasing Giants, brought to you by buyafarm.com. I'm Terry Peer with Don Higgins on the line. Good evening, Don.
How's it going, Terry?
Great. December 22nd, almost Christmas time. Fun time of year for a bunch of people who are still plugging away out there in the field.
Yeah, we've had some perfect late season weather here in Illinois. So a week ago today, I went out and took James Morgan hunting with me, and we seen 12 different bucks and probably over 40 deer. They were really hammering the real world soybeans. And we didn't shoot anything. There was a couple of specific bucks that I was looking to call out of the herd, but they didn't show up. But it was a fun evening nonetheless, and they've just been hammering the plots all week since we got that snow a week ago today.
Yeah, I want you to talk a little bit about the weather in late season, because here in Kentucky we were high 50s today. Yesterday was 55. Even though we had a cold snap about a week and a half ago, we've been really warm this weekend, and I only saw 4 doe right at last light last night. So how does weather really affect late season after, the pressure that all these deer have gotten during gun seasons?
Well, late season success, it totally hinges on the weather. And the worse the weather, the better the hunting. You get cold and snow together, and that's the perfect recipe. And you get on a good food source, and you should see a lot of deer as long as you're not in an area that's been pressured. I try to set my property and the properties that I manage up that way so there's food there. Low human pressure all year, so that when these conditions come along late season, if I still got a tag, I've got the deer on those properties hitting those food sources in daylight. And, besides the hunt James and I had a week ago, my business partner, Wes Elks with Real World, hunted here a couple times this week. Actually, he was hunting there this evening with his wife, and she just shot her first deer.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, they've been moving really good. I mean, every hunt on my property this week, whoever was hunting seen at least 40 deer, I think, on every hunt. They were just hammering those soybeans. But, it's starting to warm up. Today it got up in the 40s. It's supposed to get up into the 50s, high 50s Christmas Day. The hunting is going to be totally opposite this week what it was last week. It's going to come to a screeching halt. The deer movement's going to be primarily after dark. They won't need near as much food to stay warm, so they won't be eating as much. It's all about the weather late season, the weather and the food.
So what is a deer when it's searching for food, the debate between corn and beans, what is a deer looking for? Is it looking for carbs? Is it looking for protein, or anything and everything it can actually get to fill its belly?
Well, the corn soybean debate has raged on for a long time, and without a doubt, from what I've seen over the years in the colder weather, they prefer the soybeans. And I don't know if it's the protein in the soybeans as much as it is the fat content.
Fat, yep.
The soybeans are a high fat crop, and I think it's the fat this time of year. Now, during the antler growing season, when those deer are out there on the soybean browse, it's all about protein.
Okay.
Soybeans are a high protein and high fat food source, and I think at this time of year, it's the fat that attracts the deer more than the protein.
Which the corn is just basically a starch or a carb, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean,
And
if they're hungry, they're
like
going to
that,
eat
too.
it. But what
Yep.
what they're really searching for right now is that might be why we see the soybean, attracting so much more deer. So.
Right.
Well, we did have a little bit of an interesting story. What night was it? Maybe Thursday night this week. It was the day my wife and I took a cruise, and it was the day we got back. We flew in, and my buddy Patrick Simpson called me right after I got home, and he shot a really nice buck that evening with muzzleloader here in Kentucky, and it's got a little bit of an interesting story. I know Patrick and I have both talked to you about it, but on, I believe it was December 7th and December 8th, I saw this buck. It was under a mile away, but out on the main highway, US 25 that runs right along I-75. And we were talking about it, and I think I told you about this buck. It was real good, tall, typical frame. And I made a turn onto the road to head to work, and it was still dark. That morning I went in a little bit early, and I almost hit this deer. I'm not even so sure that I didn't brush up against it. I came to a pretty hard stop, and this deer just could not get out from in front of the vehicle, and seemed like it took him forever. I knew he was hurt really bad, and he walked into a little brush thicket and briars right beside the road, and I was in a hurry to get to work, so I didn't look. Drove by real slow on the way home that night, but it was dark. Didn't see anything. And I think I didn't tell you until the next day when I couldn't believe it, but the next morning it was about 7:30 and it was daylight, and I couldn't believe it. I went to the same area or on the same way to work, and the buck's standing in the middle of the road the second day in a row. and I called you, and I'm like, I don't know if he was with a doe and she got hit and went into that thicket and he wouldn't leave her, or what the deal was. Maybe she was wounded there or something like that. So he was moving really, really slow, and I told Patrick about him, and I said, with Pat having the only food source with soybeans, and he feeds corn, and we put a lot of soybean oil on in the feed, so he's got really the only food source around. I said, if that deer lives, I said, he looks really bad, and I could see a bunch of road rash on his back hip, but he couldn't put any weight hardly at all on his front legs. I said, he might show up, so keep an eye out. And he showed up about right around Thanksgiving, so a few weeks later. And I think Patrick then called you about it because he was trying to figure out how old the deer was. And I think it confused him a little bit, and then confused all of us because his body size was so small. But I mean, he probably already lost 40, 50 pounds at that point. He didn't, and still, when you're just getting trail camera pictures of it, you really can't see anything other than the picture. So what ended up happening is that deer was hurt really bad and had dropped a lot of weight. And Pat went out Thursday night, and the buck couldn't hardly even get up the hill, and Pat ended up shooting it. Dandy buck was not able to use any of the meat on it. We went ahead and he took it over to our taxidermist here in Kentucky, and he stuck his hand. There's literally a hole on one side of his shoulder, on one shoulder, that you could put your hand up in, and taxidermist put his glove in and went up in there, and it was just nothing but pus and nasty stuff. So the shoulder blade was broken and was up by his spine. So I mean, he got hit hard. It was amazing that he had still lived that long, because that was probably 6 weeks ago that I'd seen him. But Dandy buck, and Pat's had an unbelievable year. That's his third buck. This one will be in the mid 160s, I believe, and third buck of the year, an absolute giant for anybody. So he's had a great year, but that's the only kind of success story we've had around here because of this weather. Just it's been shut off. Hopefully that cold weather heads our way.
Yeah, that's what it takes. But it sounds like that deer got hit by a car for sure. But
yeah,
Yeah, Patrick's had a great season. So
yeah, he shot 2 bucks in Illinois, 1 buck here. But I mean, I'd never seen a shoulder blade broken and pushed clear up. I mean, it was up, almost up near the spine. So I mean, he was hurt bad. He wasn't going to live, but great buck nonetheless.
Yeah, well, congratulations to Patrick. I'm glad he got him because that deer probably would not have survived the winter.
Yep. So the only other thing I got is I finally found a small grain bin or small silo, depends on where people are at, what they call it, and went and picked it up yesterday. So it holds 2 tons of feed, and I originally thought I was just going to store my Real World Complete feed in it, but the more I've looked at the design of this thing, I think I'm just going to fabricate a feeder head and use it as a feeder and just leave it and only have to fill it once a year. So that's if anybody wants to follow my Instagram page, you'll see that project probably kicking off here after the first year. We got to do some pretty good some small fabrication work to make that work, but hoping that turns out. I got lucky and found a good one that a friend of mine was selling. He sold his farm, so.
Well, I'm sure it'll be nice. You're pretty talented with either wood or metal, either one, so I'm sure it's going to turn out nice and do exactly what you want it to.
It's like anything else. Time's the hard part, so.
Yeah.
So have you checked all of your trail cameras around? Have you got any that you're still waiting to pull now that all of the gun seasons are over in Illinois, correct?
Well, we've got a late doe season or antlerless season, which will be in the last weekend of the year in mid-January. But as far as buck season, yeah, it's all over. I've been running cameras. I actually went out and checked 3 or 4 this afternoon after church. Just, ones I hadn't visited in a while, make sure the bucks I've been watching are still around in those areas. But, I've started my consulting visits. So this past week I was in Missouri and Iowa, and I'm going to try to do some local ones for, within the 2 or 3 hours of home here over the holidays. And it's January 1st, I'll be headed to Michigan. So I'll be in Michigan for 2 or 3 or 4 days there at the first of the year, and then come home in time to pack up and head to the ATA show.
Right.
But most of my cameras have been checked since the gun season. I've still got a handful that haven't, but I put fresh batteries and new cards in them right before gun season, and those Reconyx cameras are pretty dependable, and put fresh batteries in them. They're good for 40,000 pictures, and doesn't really matter what the weather is or anything. They're going to be working whenever I go back, so I'm not too worried about checking those, but
when you're
there's always something to do.
Yeah, when you're out walking a property, whether it's consulting or it's going in and looking at your trail cameras or checking food plots, and there's snow on the ground, walk me through what does looking at a piece of property with snow on the ground do, and how do you look at it on, even though it's late season? Is it telling you anything that you can see that you can't see other times of the year?
That's a great question. You must have been reading my mind, because this afternoon I went out to this one property and got off my ATV, and I had 2 cameras on that property, but I snooped around a little bit because, when there's no snow on the ground, you can see those deer trails, but when there's snow on the ground, you can see what an individual deer is doing. And I kind of scoured the area a little bit just to see, how much traffic was not on those main trails. And it became obvious that I need to drop a few trees and funnel them deer past a couple of my stands on that property just a little bit better. Because it seems like if a mature buck can skirt your stand side, he definitely will.
Right.
But by dropping a couple trees, you can force him right close to your stands, or a lot closer to your stand, and get a shot at him where otherwise you might not have. So,
but when there's no snow on the ground, you couldn't tell whether he skirted that or slipped that way, or how the deer were
absolutely. Yep. A lot of times a mature buck doesn't use those beat down paths, but with snow on the ground, you can see exactly where he went. There's no hiding it. Without the snow, you'd never know he went through there. Just, leaves on the ground. So,
well, what made me think of the question is we got a text today from Kyle from Team Radical and said, you all got to check out this video. And I don't know that you've even seen it yet, but on the Team Radical Facebook page, Kyle went live and showed a field of harvest salad. And it looks like a feedlot where these deer have, it's pulled up on my computer right now playing, and you would not believe the tracks in this thing, in this food plot, where they've actually kicked back and, dug up underneath the snow to get down to that food source. And you would have never known that if there wasn't, how many deer are actually out there, if there wasn't either a camera on time lapse or snow on the ground. That's the only two ways you would have known.
Yeah, and the very same things happened on my place. One of the cameras I checked today was on my home farm, right where all these deer have been coming out into the soybeans, and I've got a ditch that runs through my property. And on one side of the ditch, I've got a soybean food plot, and the other side, I had a real world deadly dozen plot. And there's a bridge that goes across that ditch that the deer use all the time to cross from one side to the other. And I've got a camera on that bridge. Well, I checked the camera 8 days ago, put a new card in it. Today I went back and changed that card, and there was over 7,000 pictures in 8 days.
Wow.
Just on that food. The place was just tore up. You couldn't put your foot down without putting it on a deer track. With all that food there, the deer were just piled in, and we're talking almost 1,000 pictures a day with these deer on this food. Now, with it warming up, those deer are going to disperse out a little bit, but at the same time, if we get another cold spell this winter, them deer are going to come right back where the food's at.
Right.
So it's pretty neat to see that much deer sign in the snow, and the snow happened a week ago today, so it was only there for a week, and it absolutely looked like a hog lot.
Well, the episode 10 of our podcast set a record for downloads on it, and I think a lot of people, and of course we've gotten just an unbelievable response because of the release of Miscanthus. Real World's giant Miscanthus variety that we came out with, and we've been trying to educate people every day with, because it's kind of new to a lot of people, and there's some misconceptions out there about the product because there's so many varieties, and we see it a lot in food plot seed. Everybody wants to call one Ladino clover the same as every other Ladino clover, and that's just not the case. But as you were out on the property today, did you notice any of the heavy traffic in the snow along those Miscanthus edges that you've planted on your property?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually got my phone out and I took some pictures because, I'd hate to guess how many questions we got through personal email, Real World, text messages, everything else since releasing that Miscanthus. But one thing that we heard several times was, I want to see pictures of it in the snow in the winter. I want to see how it stands. I know how well it stands. There's absolutely nothing better. But I took some pictures today that I'm going to send to you, Terry, so you can use them on our social media and show people. But the stuff stands fantastic. It doesn't matter if it's September or February or next April, the stuff's still going to be 12 foot tall.
Yeah.
It's got stalks on it that's like bamboo. It just does not break over.
Well, the true testament of it was when we were talking with some of the experts on this variety of Miscanthus grass. And, this stuff, one of the commercial uses of Miscanthus grass, at least some of it, is biofuel. So, you have to be careful when you burn it. It can't be, if it's right up against woods, it shoots a flame. It sounds like a torch, and it's way up in the air when you burn it. So one of my questions was, okay, if you can't burn it, can you bush hog it? And he laughed at me, and I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, you don't realize the size machine you're going to have to mow it. He said, the best way to cut it is with a chainsaw. And I said, you're kidding me. I said, not even like an older sickle mower? He said, no, it'll break it. That's how tough these stalks are. So, yeah, it's been pretty interesting, and we'll be posting some pictures of, late winter, because you've actually seen snow drift up on the screen product when there's a lot more snow on. But those tracks along that edge of Miscanthus also show us that we can use it to funnel deer, because they're going to use that edge and that height variance to travel from point A to point B, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I just wrote an article about it this week that's going to appear in North American Whitetail in their spring land management issue. Different ways you can use this Miscanthus to direct deer, right to you. If you've only got one tree on your property along the edge of your native grass field or whatever, you can use a strip of Miscanthus from the heart of that field right to your tree, and those deer are going to follow that Miscanthus and make a travel corridor out of it and put them right in range of where you want them.
Yep. And if you look at Real World social media page on a post yesterday, there's actually a picture of my side-by-side standing in front of a test plot. We gave an annual plot screen product that we've formulated one last try this year, didn't we? We had it in, I think, 2 or 3 states. I put some on my farm, and it was great until it dried out, and it's maybe 2 foot tall at the highest point of it now. So it's actually interesting that you took pictures of your Miscanthus yesterday in the snow, and I took pictures, and it wasn't even bad weather. We haven't had bad weather in Kentucky yet, and all of the annual screen is laying on the ground, and that's the reason we don't sell it. We can get it for customers if you call the Real World office, but it's like you've always said, if we don't trust it and use it on our farm, we're not going to package it and put our name on it.
Well, and the whole, process that we went through to find the best screen is what we do with every product. I mean, we tested with, like you said, this annual screen mixes. We've been testing them for several years. None of them work. It doesn't matter. Anything we planted, it would look great in the summer when it was green. And if you notice the companies that do sell it, the pictures they're showing you are either in the summer or very, very early in the fall. You don't see them out there with snow on the ground showing you how good that screen is, because it just don't work. And we just simply are not going to bring that kind of a product to market. If it's not going to work, if we're not going to use it on our own farms, then we're not going to sell it. And, I'd first planted Miscanthus on my farm, it was at least 5 years ago. And it just stands fantastic every winter. And like you said, I got it on one property border and on the west side of my property, and the snow will drift up against that. Sometimes the snow drifts will be 3 or 4 feet tall, and the Miscanthus will still be 12 feet tall. It does not blow over, and the snow doesn't knock it down.
I'm going to be interested as you go through your consulting season this year, if you actually find a farm where you wouldn't make a recommendation for using Miscanthus, because I can't picture a situation or property where it wouldn't benefit either the block of line of sight, getting you in and out of a stand or a location, or funneling deer as a transition area. In those 3 situations, I think this product could absolutely be a game changer for everybody. So I'm curious if you're actually going to have a situation with a consulting property this year where it wouldn't work, or you wouldn't recommend it.
Well, so far, every plan that I've done has at least a little bit of Miscanthus somewhere. When I consult, I try not to push products that people don't need onto them. I just look at the property as if it was my own, and I lay out exactly what I would do if it was mine. And
right.
I do it with regards to not wasting money. I don't want to waste a customer's money. They put their trust in me, and I feel like I owe them that. So I just lay it out exactly as I would. And so far, every plan I've done has at least a little bit of Miscanthus somewhere on the property.
Right. Well, my son and I were muzzleloader hunting last night in an elevated blind, and it's only on an 8-foot tower. And I was sitting in the blind last night thinking, man, I wish I had miscanthus right around this blind to grow up and actually protect us when we got out of the ladder and, you know, slipped out. I have a good entrance and exit route, but to block, you know, line of sight from the food plot back in, you know, I don't have anything. And man, just you know, a handful of rhizomes around that would be an absolute game changer for me. So that's one of my many lists of where I'm going to be putting this stuff at here this spring when the ground thaws up.
Right. And, you know, there's probably one more issue that we should probably hit on while we're talking about miscanthus, because we've had so many comments about it. This miscanthus that we're selling is a sterile plant. It is not invasive whatsoever. Now, there is miscanthus that is invasive. It is not this same species of miscanthus or variety or whatever you want to call it. This is a sterile cross between two different kinds of miscanthus. It does not spread. It is not invasive whatsoever. And we had a lot of comments. People thought they knew what they was talking about. They were talking about a totally different miscanthus.
Right.
This giant miscanthus we're selling is not the least bit invasive.
The funny thing is, if it's the lack of understanding or the lack of knowledge, okay? Instead of going into every situation thinking like you know everything, just sit back and listen and study and then make a decision, right? I mean, people jump to so many conclusions, and my favorite response to it was our buddy Josh Pretzer out in Kansas, who's been fighting invasive Egyptian wheat issues from people who've used Egyptian wheat for a screen. And it's gone out into his fields, and he's like, everybody is so upset about a non-invasive, sterile-seeded miscanthus, but Egyptian wheat's done so much more damage out here, and he makes his money, you know, row cropping. And you want to get him fired up sometime, just tell him that, you know, you want to talk Egyptian wheat, and you want to know about it. He'll be happy to tell you, because when we were actually on a trip, our last trip, when we went and saw this miscanthus being grown and harvested, when we were finalizing the deal, I think we were sitting at Cracker Barrel, and one of Josh's friends was with us. He was doing some photography and video work of it, and I sent either myself or Aaron sent Josh a text message and said, we're not going to do miscanthus. We're going to focus only on Egyptian wheat, just as a joke. I could hear him yelling on the other side of the phone. He was so mad.
And that's what's crazy about social media is all these people that have no idea whatsoever what they're talking about throw out their opinion like they're experts, and they're totally wrong. They're absolutely wrong. And, man, I'll tell you what, social media would be the last place to go for advice about anything, because there's so many experts out there.
Well, here's the thing. I have no problem with people asking questions.
Right.
Because that's how you learn, right? And we sell our product, and every one of our sponsors that we are affiliated with are higher end product or technology that they sell their products through understanding how we're different. So for somebody to just, hey, why is this different? But the people that just get flat out rude with us and won't even take 3 seconds to listen to facts, oh boy, it tests our patience every day.
Yeah, we probably better move on to another topic.
Yeah. So you ready to do the buyafarm.com segment today?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
All right, this week we're featuring a 280-acre tract of property in Marion County, Illinois. If you're looking for a larger tract of land for hunting and recreation, this just might be it. This tract has excellent deer and turkey hunting. It's already set up with 6 established food plots and extensive trail system throughout the property. There's 2 muddy hunting blinds already on the property, for approximately 15 or so ladder stands already in place. There's a new pond that's been dug on the property. It's 25 foot deep. There's an orchard with 36 established fruit trees. And I'm told that the value of the timber, the market value of the timber that's on the property right now is $450,000. So you could pay down the principal on that property pretty quick by just harvesting the timber and selling it. But it's also got a 1,200 square foot cabin with a full 1,200 square foot walkout basement with central heat and air conditioning. There's rural water. There's also a great building site if someone would want to build a new home on the property, and 280 acres. The taxes on that is only $6,051 a year. But it's hard to find tracts that are that big anymore. 280 acres all in one tract. So, especially that's all set up, ready to go for deer hunting. But if you're interested in that property, Agent Don Bailey is who you want to call. Don's phone number is 618-919-1031. And he'd be happy to show you the property, answer any questions you have. You can also go to the buyafarm.com website and just look for 280 acres in Marion County, Illinois, and you can see photos and all the details.
Don, where is Marion County? About where is that?
Oh, Marion County would be down, where Interstate 57 and 64 intersect at Mount Vernon. This property would be about 20 miles or so northeast of there.
Okay. Gives people a little bit of an idea what part it's in.
Yeah. So, if you're out of state or whatever, and it would be, and you have to travel to the property, it's not that far off of Interstate 57 or 64. Either one of those interstates would get you real close to the property.
So I mean, you could recoup a lot immediately off of that timber value. So absolutely, that's got some potential right there just to generate some cash, and then the fact that you could hunt it immediately sounds like people have blinds and stands already in place. So and it never hurts to have an orchard.
Nope. This is a dandy, and even if you're listening and you're in the market for a property, I know just in the interest of full disclosure, I'm an agent for Buy a Farm as well, and my phone has started ringing. I'm getting calls daily now about real estate. The rut's over, hunting season's starting to wind down, and people are really starting to shop around. So if this property don't interest you, I encourage you to go to the buyafarm.com website. There is I don't know how many properties are on there, but well over 100.
Right.
Don't forget about Buy a Farm. They can, and here's the other thing. I just threw this advice out on my social media over the weekend, but a lot of good properties come along and they never make it to the website. If you're in the market, you need to contact one of those agents from Buy a Farm and give them the specs on what you're looking for. How many acres you want, what you've got to spend,
what part of the state you're looking for.
Exactly. And give them your wish list. And if something like that comes along, the first thing they're going to do is call you. They're not going to run to put it on the website. If they've already got a potential buyer, they're going to contact you. So, I just encourage you to get on buyafarm.com's website if you're in the market and contact any of those agents that are listed there. Give them the specs, what you're looking for. And if something comes up, they'll definitely get a hold of you.
Yep. All right. So give Don Bailey a phone call, 618-919-1031. So we've been getting still a lot of questions. People are picking our brain on a lot of different angles. So we're trying to get to all of them, and I'm sure we'll get to some, this spring as we transition into, preparing for 2020 a little bit more. But I trust you got a couple good questions we can talk about today.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions submitted, and
I think that's why people like this. I think that's why people like this podcast, because not only are we learning from, obviously you as an accomplished hunter, but I think people learn a lot through other people's situations that you're commenting on. So I think that's one thing we've done a little bit differently with this that appeals to people. So.
Right. And we was going to try to answer them all, but
no, there's no way.
We're getting more questions than we can possibly answer. And one thing I want to throw out before we get started is I had a question that I was going to use today, but the person that submitted the question did not completely fill out the form.
Uh-oh.
And so I was going to have no way to send that person a T-shirt. And even though if it's a legit person, I think it was because it was a good question. So when you submit your question, make sure you fill out that form completely. I just simply don't have time to track people down so I can send them a free T-shirt. If the form's not filled out completely, I'm going to go on to another question because we simply got so many to choose from. So let's get started. The first question on this episode comes from Jason Trosh. And Jason is from Cary, Ohio. So Jason says, what's your thoughts on mature bucks coming back to a TSI bedding area after permitting raccoon hunting at nighttime with dogs on a 100-acre, mostly timbered property later in the hunting season, late December before raccoon hibernation, occasionally, which means a few times during states with longer deer seasons like Ohio. Deer archery season in Ohio lasts until early February. I understand that keeping intrusions on the property strictly for deer hunting, other hunters do not have land access. An argument I hear and understand. Honestly, the raccoon population is out of control in some areas of northwest Ohio. Raccoons are destroying new corn plantings in the spring in some bottomlands. Also, Ohio has a January muzzleloader season, so their deer are not protected from other pressure nearby. Well, Jason, I think Terry pretty much expressed my sentiments as I was reading the question. If you want to kill mature deer, you've got to take things to another level than typical deer hunter. What might fly for the average deer hunter just looking to, fill his tag is not going to cut it if you're after mature bucks. My properties that I manage are sanctuaries. I don't want anything going on in there. And I know that sounds a little bit selfish, but, I've worked to pay for those properties or to pay the lease on the properties or whatever. So if I've got control of them and I've done the work to pay for it, there's nothing else going to happen because my number one goal is to kill the biggest bucks I possibly can. Now, if you're fine with the bucks you're shooting and you're allowing raccoon hunting, then, if that works for you, by all means, go for it. But when it comes to mature bucks, if you want to kill the biggest bucks possible, you're going to have to do things a little different than the average deer hunter. And I don't want a coon hunter in there. I don't want dogs in there. I don't want mushroom hunters. I don't want anything. And that's just the brutal truth. And it's probably not the answer you wanted to hear. And I understand, that raccoons cause problems with, crop damage and everything else. But I'd be looking at trapping just outside of the sanctuary or something else as a way to control them. Terry, you may want to add a little more to this, but
well, I get fired up about this. I'll be honest with you because I had a situation this year already, and I even put it on. I got video. I have a sanctuary area right up against my food plot. I don't have switchgrass on my property, but I got what I nicknamed Kentucky switchgrass, which is rose briars and stuff so nasty thick you can't walk through it. Strategically positioned right next to my food plot. In a trail that comes out of it, I have a trail camera that I keep on video, and I get deer, my mature bucks coming out of this point of this sanctuary, either going in my soybeans or in the early season going into alfalfa. And I pulled the card. It was the first week. It was right. I'm thinking it was right the weekend before archery season opened up in Kentucky, and I had 2 target bucks that were using that trail all the time. And I pull up this video, and it's two dudes walking through. I can hear them talking, walking. They're looking at their little remote thing, looking for their dog. Walked right in across it, and my property is posted. I mean, we got a bunch of those real world no trespassing signs, and I think they're on just about every tree on the property line. And there's no way they could have gotten on that property without seeing it. And I got hot. And what made me even more mad is the response I got from the coon hunting people was, well, what damage did they do? Thinking that, they tore fence or they, vandalized. They didn't, but they could have cost me a shot at one of those mature bucks, because all it takes is I don't walk through that area of the farm. I don't want anybody else walking through it. And this whole debate that, yes, I want different outdoorsmen to work together, but that doesn't mean you tromp across my farm. Okay?
Yep.
And I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and your dog ran in there. Call me. And just the fact that, well, we didn't do any harm. Well, according, that it's not going to hurt the deer. The deer will come right back in there. This whole podcast is talking about 4.5, 5.5, 6.5 or older bucks that are completely different than every other deer that's on your property, and they're just not going to take that intrusion. And you can see it all over social media all the time, the bickering back and forth between the coon hunters and the deer hunters. And the bottom line is that I pay for that property. It's going to be run the way I want. You don't pay for it. If your dog gets loose on it, call me. We'll get your dog, but we're going to be careful about it. But doggone it, I do. And trust me, Kentucky is a feed state or a bait state. And I feed a lot, and I make a lot of coons fat. I mean, I hate coons just as much as I hate turkeys, because they eat just as much food as the deer do. But I'm still not letting somebody run in there and go coon hunting.
Okay, well, Jason, I think that probably answers your question. We do appreciate your question. You will be getting a free Chasing Giants t-shirt. So thanks for submitting the question. Be looking for that shirt in the mail. I'm going to move on to the next question. It comes from Holden Gates of Paris, Illinois. And Holden says, what is the single best improvement you can do to a property besides food plots to better provide for the deer in the off season? And this goes right along with the last question. Actually, the best thing you can do is provide security, a sanctuary. A mature buck, he wants freedom of human intrusion more than anything else. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You're probably going to hear me say it many more times. When the sun comes up, a buck wants to put his head down where he knows he's safe for the day. He can wait till it's dark and get on his feet and walk a mile to a good food source. But when the sun's up, he wants to be safe. So the best thing you can do on a property is to provide secure bedding cover. You want to build on that any, Terry?
I think it's spot on. I mean, if security, bedding, I think you said once that what's the ratio of bedding to food that you want?
Well, I want every single acre on my property to be either bedding or food.
Right.
I want enough food to get the deer through the entire winter, so there's just a little bit left in the spring when they disperse. But whatever's not in food, I want to be in bedding cover.
But I think a lot of hunters kind of miss the boat a little bit on this, even with small properties, is, they'll worry about the food, but then won't worry about the cover. And you can even do this on small properties, because we've seen it time after time. Every buck's a little bit different, but a buck doesn't want to have to travel a long way to get to food. He'd rather stand up and eat, right? For the most part. You'll have some bucks that travel a long way like Trump did, but for the most part, I think we miss the boat sometimes as hunters, that we're always worried about food and not worried about those thickets, that heavy bedding cover, that native grasses, that they can get in there and feel safe. So I think that's it.
Right. I
mean, outside of Illinois, then you can start breaking off into nutrition and minerals and stuff like that. But I believe he's from Illinois, so that isn't an option. So I'd focus on bedding.
Right. So thanks for the question, Holden. You'll also be getting a free Chasing Giants t-shirt. Next question comes from Kurt Mashing from Aviston, Illinois. Kurt says, we have no shortage of deer sightings and pass on small bucks consistently, but rarely see the same mature deer year after year. What would cause a continuous rotation of bucks through the property? Without a doubt, Kurt, those deer are getting killed. There's a lot of guys that can let a 1.5 or a 2.5-year-old buck walk, but there's very, very few guys that percentage-wise, among all deer hunters, the percentage is very low of deer hunters that are going to let a 3.5-year-old buck walk. And I have no doubt whatsoever that the bucks you're talking about, where they're going is they're getting killed. That's just the brutal truth, as sad as it is. But
Kurt doesn't say how big his property is, does he?
No, he does not. I read his entire question. So
yeah. So the more detail you can give us in these questions, the better we can answer them. But from what we see, I agree with you. I mean, you can manage all you want, but if people around you are hunting the fence and being stupid, you're narrowing your chances.
Right. So appreciate your question, Kurt. Move on to the last one for this episode. This last one comes from Isaac Heek. Isaac is from DuBois, Indiana. Isaac says, hey, Don, last season I had a 150-inch 3-year-old leave our farm the entire season and go to a neighbor's a mile away. He returned the first part of January. This season, he's a 160-inch 4.5-year-old deer that ran around with a 145-inch 5.5-year-old deer all summer. November 1st, he left my farm and went to the same neighbors that I know well and we share pictures with. I harvested the 145-inch 5.5-year-old on November 17th, thinking I had to kill that deer to keep my 160-inch home. My question is, does the 160-inch check our farm periodically undercover to see if the dominant buck is still there? Or do you think he will come back in January like last year? Also, does taking out the brute 145-inch give me a better chance of holding him to my property next year? Thanks. I've been learning a lot from you and my experiences with these two deer the past 2 seasons.
Question, but it's a great question.
Right. First of all, I expect that the deer that's still, if he's still alive, the one you want to return home, if he's still alive, he will more than likely follow the same annual pattern that he has in the past. In regards to whether he's going to leave again, whether the one buck chased him off or he left to get away from that buck, that remains to be seen. There's no hard and fast rules when it comes to these mature bucks. To be honest, if I had to guess, I'm going to guess that he's going to continue to follow the same annual pattern that he has in the past, and he's going to leave your farm again next year. You said this year on November 1st he left. Well, my advice to you is to kill him in October if you possibly can.
Absolutely.
So don't take it. I mean, there's really no way to know. Each buck's an individual. Let me see here. There was another question. There's multiple questions here. Oh, you asked if the buck periodically returns undercover to see if the dominant buck is still there. Now, I don't think they think it through that much, really. I don't think that they've got your buck has moved off and he really wants to stay on your place. So every once in a while he slips back to see if the bully's still there. And if the bully's gone, he's going to stay there. I think that might be giving him just a little bit too much credit for reasoning and thinking. Like I said, my guess is that he's going to follow the same pattern that he's been following his entire life. Although it's very possible that he will stay on your farm. Another article I recently just wrote that hadn't even been published yet is in regards to the idea that some people have, or some hunters have, that if you kill a big buck in one area, then another big mature buck is going to move in and take his place. And I don't think that happens whatsoever. I mean, where do these mature bucks come from? All across the Midwest or the whole country, every fall mature bucks are getting killed. So, what is a message sent out to all the others that, hey, over here, Joe the buck got killed, so there's an opening. Come on in and move in. I mean, I don't think that happens whatsoever. I think what happens is there was another buck that was already there. Maybe he was second in on the pecking order, and when the number one buck gets killed, he automatically, instantly becomes the number one buck. And with his newfound status, he becomes a lot more active and a lot more visible than he was before. He didn't no longer has to worry about the big buck kicking his butt or whatever. So he's out strutting his stuff and is a lot more visible and a lot more active. And a hunter might mistakenly think that he just moved in, but I suspect that he was there all along. Now, he might have been, that was part of his home range. He didn't just move in, but he might have been spending more time in another part of his home range. And when that buck gets killed, then he starts spending more time there. And that's very well could be what happens in your situation. But, they're all individuals. So it's really, there's no hard and fast rules that all we can do is take educated guesses.
Well,
and my educated guess is that your buck's going to continue to do what he's been doing.
I want to circle back to one of the statements you just made, and because I think a lot of people get confused about because you've said it, I've said it, where we kill a bully buck, and whether it's a cull or we want to target a buck early season. So what we're talking about there 90% of the time is we're trying to protect a young buck. So if we have a target buck that's a 3-year-old that we don't want shot, we might want to take out a 6.5-year-old or 5.5-year-old that normally might not be on the hit list, or that just so that dominant buck doesn't, because that 3-year-old's the one that's going to go, out roaming, searching, right? That's the one that's got the biggest jeopardy of getting shot by somebody who's not managing their property. So I think people get a little bit confused about killing the bully buck or killing the dominant buck, but there's not a flag that goes up in the middle of the farm that says, hey, this spot's open. I need another 5 or 6.5-year-old to come in here.
Right. Absolutely. And, ironically, most of the time, the dominant buck is not the buck with the biggest rack. The dominant buck is the buck with the biggest body. A lot of times they're 140-inch 8-pointers.
Right.
Mature bucks, for sure. But a lot of times the buck with the biggest rack has a little bit smaller body, and he is not the dominant buck.
So the scenario that I'm referring to is I had what I believed at the time was a 5.5-year-old buck here in Kentucky that I wanted to kill early. He ended up being 6.5, just so an up-and-comer or a buck I was going to let my 15-year-old son shoot, I didn't want him, having to go out somewhere else. I wanted him to stay put. So that was the scenario of killing that bully buck or that older buck, to protect that younger one that I either think has great potential for me or it'd be a great buck for my son to shoot. So I think people get a little confused with that, Don, and I don't know if Isaac was heading that direction, but while we were close to that topic, I wanted to bring it up because I think that's where people get, oh, well, if I shoot this deer, the other ones are going to show up in daylight more. I don't think so. I think there's too many other factors like weather and pressure and all that happen with that. But
I agree, Terry. I think what we need to do at some point is we need to have a episode on nothing but culling bucks.
No, that'd be great. I think a lot of people would get a lot of information about that. But the thing that impresses me that Isaac's talking about is if these facts that he's giving here are accurate, he's really ahead of the curve. Because look at it this way: all of this data that he has, the bucks on he's seeing it in bachelor groups in early season, and at the beginning of November he leaves, and then he comes back in January. So Isaac's got a great shot of killing this buck, here in a week or two if he's hunting because that deer's probably going to come back. And if Isaac doesn't get a shot at him, he could put a plan together this spring for his property to do what we did on my property, and that's go in and get a target buck in early season. And you can do it. You just have to put the puzzle pieces together for having the right stand in the right spot for different scenarios of it. So Isaac's in a great spot right here where he could, kill a dandy of a buck either this year or next year, because he's got the research and the facts, already on his side. Mm-hmm. He's not going blind.
I like that he recognizes that the buck has two different ranges, if you will. A lot of bucks will have a summer range, and they'll have a different fall-winter range, and they move back and forth at about the same time every year within a few days. And Isaac not only recognizes that, but he knows where the buck's two ranges are. I mean, he knows that he moves a mile away, and he knows the exact farm where he's moving to.
You were the first one I ever heard talk about seasonal pattern or year-to-year pattern, and Mark Drury did a lot of it, and he's talked about it. But you two are the ones that really, honed in on what a deer does year after year is more important than what a deer does today versus next week. So him learning what his pattern was, he's probably not going to change it. He might, especially if somebody bumps him. You never know that. But you got the facts here to lay out a great plan for either January or next October. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think Isaac's got a great chance to kill that buck. He's already got a lot of information, in his pocket. So it's just a matter of, putting it to use and getting those stands ready ahead of time so that you're not a step behind that buck. You're a step ahead of him next year. So,
and
anyway,
hopefully if he doesn't kill him this year, he'll blow up next year as a 5-year-old.
There you go. Maybe next year he'll be a 200-incher.
You never know.
So, right. I think that's a good idea, Terry, that at some point we just do a podcast basically on calling bucks. We can even go through the submitted questions and pick out questions that reference calling and are related to that topic. So
yeah, the word culling is so broad. I mean, we've culled everything from a spike to a 10.5-year-old buck before. So I mean, it's very broad, and I think it gets confused a lot. And my favorite is when somebody shoots a small buck and says they called it. But
yeah,
hey, I'll be the first to admit, in shotgun season in Illinois, I shot the wrong buck. So I mean, you just got to fess up and we thought sure. I haven't even told you this. We thought sure that the buck I shot in Illinois was 5.5 years old, and the picture trail that we had of that deer, I mean, I could have swore he was. And the age report from DeerAge.com came back on Friday, and he was 4.5. So shame on me. I learned from it and move on. But with the data we had, we made the best decision. It was just the wrong decision. So you just got to keep learning and fess up to it. But my favorite is when somebody shoots a small one and says, "Oh, he's a 7-year-old. We're culling him out of the herd." That's always fun.
Yeah. We've all seen those situations, but so if you guys have got any questions regarding culling, send those in, and maybe
maybe after ATA show or something, we put that on the schedule. But start getting us these questions on culls in different specific situations or specific bucks, and we'll get Don to try to help you with that.
Well, I've got some thoughts that are going to go against the grain of what's accepted, in the hunting world in regards to culling. And I've got about 25 years or more experience on my own property where I've been managing for the biggest bucks I can possibly grow here. And I'll share some of that on that episode whenever we get around to doing it.
So, all right. Well, it's December 22nd. What do you got cooking for Christmas?
Got the family coming in tomorrow. Actually, going to do Christmas at our house a couple days early and head to my mom and dad's there for Christmas Day. But spending time with family. Looking forward to seeing my grandsons tomorrow. So How about you, Terry?
Oh, well, we'll do the rotation here. I'm actually working tomorrow. Since we took our vacation last week on that cruise, I'm going to work and let all my other managers take off to spend the week with their family. So I'm going to work. I'm going to work on Monday. Watch the weather for the end of the week and see where my best shot at hunting is. If you're all warm up there, I don't know that I'm going to come up, but we'll see what the weather is. I still got an Illinois tag that I want to try to get. So I don't know if I've been a good enough boy to get any good stuff or not. What do you think?
Oh, I bet you get something. If worse comes to worse, you can go out and buy yourself something.
Yeah, exactly. That's
go.
usually how it ends up. My wife says that how am I supposed to find you something for Christmas whenever you want something, you just go buy it. So
I'm the same way. I hear it at my house too.
I'll end up getting a flannel shirt and socks or something like that. So, all right. Well, you got any closing thoughts before we sign off and wish everybody Merry Christmas?
Yeah, I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Value that time with your family and friends, and don't forget the reason for the season, the birth of our Savior Jesus Christ. Keep that in your thoughts and throughout this holiday season.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I am going to ask that, we get a lot of positive feedback from our fellow Christians out there. We got a situation here where a very good friend of our family was in a really bad car accident. Her name is Donna Stewart. So all you prayer warriors out there, if you can say a prayer, she's on life support right now, and the family's trying to make some decisions. So just a really tough situation that can use all of the prayers. So if you never can have too many, so I would appreciate you all lifting up the Stewart family for us. So with that, we want to thank all of our sponsors and wish everybody a Merry Christmas. So we're going to sign off. Take care.